The fluorescent lights of the Sterling Tower hummed their lonely song as Marcus wiped down the marble floors, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished surface. It was 2 a.m., and most of the world was asleep, including his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, safe at his sister's apartment across town. This was his life now: mop buckets and midnight shifts, trading sleep for survival, dignity for daycare fees. He never imagined that in less than an hour, a single desperate act would shatter everything he thought he knew about the world, about wealth, and about the invisible walls that separated people like him from people like her. Marcus had been cleaning office buildings for 3 years, ever since his wife died giving birth to Lily. The medical bills had devoured their savings, their home, their future. But he never complained, not when his back ached, not when other dads were coaching Little League while he was scrubbing toilets. Lily had his smile, her mother's eyes, and a laugh that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Tonight felt different, though. The executive floors were usually deserted, but as Marcus pushed his cart past the corner office, he heard something, a strange, gasping sound that made his blood run cold. He shouldn't have looked. He should have minded his business like he'd been taught. But something pulled him toward that partially open door, some instinct that whispered someone needs help. The woman was sprawled on the carpet, her designer suit jacket discarded, her face turning an alarming shade of blue. Her hands clawed at her throat, eyes wide with terror. Marcus recognized her immediately. Everyone who worked in the building knew Victoria Sterling, the billionaire CEO whose face graced magazine covers and business news segments. The woman who'd inherited her father's empire and tripled it before she turned 35. She was dying right in front of him. "Ma'am." Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his training from a half-forgotten CPR class flooding back. Her lips were swelling rapidly, her breathing reduced to horrible, whistling gasps. Anaphylactic shock. He'd seen it once before when Lily's classmate had an allergic reaction to peanuts. His hands shook as he grabbed her designer purse, dumping its contents across the floor. Lipstick, phone, wallet, there. An EpiPen rolled across the carpet. But as he snatched it up, his heart sank. The device was cracked, clearly broken, probably dropped and forgotten weeks ago. Victoria's eyes met his, and he saw the awful awareness there. She knew she was dying. Marcus's mind raced. He'd read somewhere, years ago, that mouth-to-mouth resuscitation could sometimes help anaphylaxis victims by forcing air past the swelling. It was a desperate measure, probably useless, maybe even harmful. But watching this woman suffocate on the floor of her own office, watching the light dim in her eyes, he couldn't just do nothing. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and pressed his lips to hers. He breathed into her mouth once, twice, 3 times, forcing air past the constriction, keeping his rhythm steady even as his heart hammered against his ribs. With his free hand, he fumbled for her phone, dialing 911, gasping out the address between breaths. It felt like hours. It was probably 90 seconds. But he didn't stop until the paramedics burst through the door, didn't stop until professional hands pulled him away, didn't stop until he heard that beautiful, terrible sound of Victoria Sterling gasping air into her lungs. The paramedics worked with swift efficiency, administering epinephrine, stabilizing her vital signs. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, one of them clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You saved her life, buddy." Another minute and he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Marcus watched them wheel her toward the elevator, his whole body trembling with adrenaline. Then he did what he always did, he picked up his mop and went back to work. He thought that was the end of it. He thought he'd go back to his invisible existence, cleaning up after people who never noticed him. But 3 days later, as he was preparing to start his shift, his supervisor called him into the office. "You're fired," the man said, not meeting his eyes. Marcus felt the floor drop away. What? Why? Complaint from upper management. Inappropriate contact with an executive. Zero tolerance policy. The words didn't make sense. He'd saved her life. Understanding crashed over him like ice water. Someone had seen him kiss Victoria Sterling, and without context, without explanation, it looked like exactly what it wasn't. It looked like the janitor assaulting the billionaire. "I was helping her," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "She was dying. Not my decision. Security will escort you out." Marcus walked out of the Sterling Tower in a daze, his mind spinning. How would he pay rent? How would he afford Lily's asthma medication? He'd been barely surviving before, now he was drowning. For 2 weeks, he pounded the pavement, applying everywhere, but the termination on his record was like a scarlet letter. No one wanted to hire a janitor fired for inappropriate conduct from a prestigious building. His savings evaporated. His sister couldn't support them forever. He started selling his possessions, piece by piece, keeping only what Lily needed. Then, on a Tuesday morning, as he was checking the classifieds at the public library, his phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Chen. The voice was female, crisp, professional. This is Amanda Chen, executive assistant to Victoria Sterling. Ms. Sterling would like to meet with you. Today, if possible. Marcus almost hung up. Almost said no. But something in the woman's tone, an urgency, maybe even a plea, made him agree. The Sterling Tower looked different in daylight, gleaming and imposing. Security escorted him not to the executive floor but higher, to a private penthouse office he'd never been allowed to clean. The view stretched across the entire city, a vista of possibility he'd only ever glimpsed through windows while holding a spray bottle. Victoria Sterling stood by the window, looking smaller somehow than she had on the magazines, more human. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. Mr. Chen, she said, and her voice cracked. Marcus, I need to apologize. He stood frozen, unsure how to respond. I was unconscious when they took me to the hospital. By the time I woke up and learned what happened, learned what you did for me, she closed her eyes. They'd already fired you. On my company's policy. Because of optics and liability and all the soulless corporate garbage that lets us sleep at night while people like you suffer. She crossed the room, standing directly in front of him. You saved my life. And my company destroyed yours in return. That's unacceptable. Marcus found his voice. I just did what anyone would do. No, Victoria said firmly. You did what almost no one would do. You risked everything, your job, your reputation, for a stranger. And I've spent 2 weeks learning about you. About your daughter. About the medical debt from your wife's death that you're still paying off. About how you work 70-hour weeks and still can't get ahead. She handed him an envelope. This isn't charity. It's justice. And it's a job offer, facilities director, full benefits, salary that will let you actually see your daughter grow up. Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. The number on the contract made his vision blur. The second check, marked medical debt relief, made his knees buckle. Why? He whispered. Victoria's eyes glistened. Because 3 weeks ago, I thought success meant profit margins and market share. I thought I'd built something meaningful. Then a janitor taught me what value really means. What kindness really costs. She smiled, and it transformed her face. You gave me my life back, Marcus. Let me give you yours. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the Sterling Tower lobby, not with a mop, but with Lily's hand in his. She was starting a new school, one with art programs and field trips. He had an apartment with 2 bedrooms and windows that actually opened. He had health insurance and weekends and a future. But the greatest change wasn't in his bank account. It was in the way people saw him now, really saw him, because Victoria Sterling had made sure everyone knew the truth. The janitor who saved a billionaire's life. The father who embodied grace under impossible circumstances. Sometimes the smallest acts of humanity create the biggest ripples. Sometimes one breath shared between strangers can change everything. And sometimes, in a world that tells us we're invisible, all it takes is one person who refuses to look away.